Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the December edition of Tech Connect Thursday, powered by WEtech Alliance in partnership with Invest WindsorEssex, FedDev Ontario, Clair College, University of Windsor, as well as Workforce WindsorEssex. So my name is Sam Branton from WEtech Alliance. I am our manager of talent programs and engagement, and I have the pleasure of overseeing WEtech Alliance's talent programs and initiatives, including the Tech Connect program portfolio, which you are a part of right now. So I could not be more excited to welcome Elev8 Web Studio to the virtual stage today. So first, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Elev8 Web Studio. So this company is Southwestern Ontario's leading WordPress development team. From a single web page to more than 1 million, Elev8 Web Studios builds custom themes and plugins for organizations of all shapes and sizes, from the smallest nonprofit to multinational corporations. They are also authors of WordPress Snippets, the most popular WordPress extension for Visual Studio Code, with over 400,000 active users. So what is Tech Connect Thursday? So if this is your first session, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the program as well. So it's an opportunity for those who are curious about working in tech and those working in tech to make connections and learn about exciting career opportunities and industry sector insights, trends, and initiatives happening within our region as well as beyond. So the goal of this program is for you to meet some of the fastest growing and innovative companies, people, and organizations leading the way across the entire tech industry. Ultimately, Tech Connect Thursday's goal is to help plug you into the Windsor-Essex tech scene and beyond. So to date, we have hosted about 10 Tech Connect sessions featuring over 10 businesses and organizations with approximately 650 students as well as professionals registered. So to be considerate and accommodate everyone attending today from across the region, thank you to all of our attendees for joining us here on Zoom. You may not be able to see all of the attendees, but you will have ample opportunity to engage with all of our guests during the Q&A portion. So just some logistics before we get started. So if you'd like to join in the discussion, feel free to use the chat feature. Should be located at the bottom of your video window to help engage with session attendees. Also, if you have a question for our guests, you may submit questions at any time throughout the session using the Q&A box located in the bottom window. You may also upvote questions that you would like answered. And should you experience any technical difficulties, please send a message in the chat box. And finally, this presentation will be recorded and a video file and relevant links will also be available on WEtech Alliance's YouTube channel and included in our attendee follow-up email as well. So now that that's sort of out of the way, I'm pleased to introduce our guest from Elev8 Web Studio, Jason Pomerleau. So welcome, Jason. How are you today?
Hello. Very good. How are you?
Excellent. So without further ado, we'll just sort of dive right into the questions as we do have quite a few. So first, do you not mind telling me a little bit about yourself and your company, and perhaps what sets you apart from others within your industry?
Sure. So I'll start with maybe a little bit about myself. So I started building websites in the late 1990s. So I have been at this for a while. I've got the gray hairs to sort of prove it. And I've been doing that more on than off over the last 25 years or so. And At Elev8 Web Studio, as you mentioned, we are a WordPress development shop. So we build custom themes for companies. We extend WordPress's functionality. So we write custom plugins for WordPress. And ultimately, I feel like what sets us apart from others is that we are sort of solely focused on the WordPress platform. It's big and there's lots to it, and we're a team of half a dozen people, and basically our big differentiator is that we don't try to do 100 different things. We're not social media experts. We're not advertising experts. Really, we're sort of, I guess, what I would describe us as a digital construction company. We build things. And so, we've chosen the WordPress platform, which is the most popular web platform content management system out there by a long shot. I think the last time I looked, it was about 43% market share. And then the rest of the market is fragmented amongst thousands and thousands of other, sort of competing CMSs. I think the number two content management system in terms of market share is about 1.8%. Just to give you an idea of how sort of enormous WordPress is in that sort of that space. And so what sets us apart ultimately is that focus and that specialty that we want to really, our aim is to do one thing really, really well, and to do great work, on the platform. I've had lots of different work experiences over the years, and I've worked in companies that were maybe a little bit more generalist, and it was really, really hard when you've got 20 different areas of focus to really do great work. You can do good work, but it's hard to do great work, in any one of those areas. And so, yeah, that's sort of our differentiator, is that focus.
Absolutely. Sort of becoming the expert in your field. I like that.
Exactly.
So how did you decide that Windsor-Essex was the place that you would like to start and grow your company?
Oh, that's an easy one. I grew up here. I grew up in Windsor. And I spent 10 years in professional IT services. So I was really lucky to be able to, in that job that I had, to work with literally hundreds of companies across the region. I really made it a point to get to know the people that I was working with, at each of those customer environments. And so when it came time to go out on my own and to start my business, I was able to, I was lucky enough to have a sort of a database of professional connections and contacts to start, calling when, to see if we could maybe do some work together. And so I actually left Windsor-Essex and lived in London, Ontario for almost 5 years. But while I was in London, Ontario, I was 2 or 3 times a month, I was driving into Windsor to meet with customers. And so, that's really where the bulk of our business is in the Windsor-Essex area. We do have customers all over North America. We've got some in the ultra far north in Nunavut and that area, all the way down into the southern United States. But I would say probably 3/4 of our business is working with small, medium, and regionally large companies in the Windsor-Essex area.
Awesome. Would you like to describe your company culture in perhaps a few words?
Yes, I believe in my questionnaire it was 3 words. And
Yeah.
so I would say for those 3 words, it's team comes first. We are a very focused on, treating our team well and providing an environment in which everyone can thrive and everyone can be successful. And our philosophy really boils down to, if we have a happy team and a productive team, and we line all of those things up in the right ways, that they will in turn make our customers happy and, and lead to the sort of the business success.
That's great. So what does a typical day look like for you?
Well, I tend to be in a lot of calls and meetings, whether it's talking to existing customers or talking to new prospects or speaking with my colleagues, in a project management capacity. I would say, sometimes my calendar looks like the 28th level of Tetris. And in between those appointments, I tend to get a lot of email. And so I would say that probably 2/3 to 3/4 of my typical day is in meetings or in conversations or, responding to emails from our customers or from other folks on the team. And then I do actually still write code from time to time, not as much as I used to, and maybe not as much as I would love to. But I actually do still contribute directly to our products and services. So yeah, I do a little bit of everything still.
That's good. You're an active part of the team. So
Yes.
That's great to see. If you were to be hiring, what type of tech talent would you be typically looking for, if that were to be the case?
Yeah, so we're a WordPress shop, and so ultimately what we're looking for is experience and on the WordPress platform. Having said that, that talent can be hard to find. And so often what we find is that we just look for folks with web development experience, people who have built websites, maybe not necessarily on WordPress, but maybe using some other platforms or technologies. And then where we need to, we will teach the WordPress side of the platform. So we actually have an in-house, what I would call an apprenticeship-like program where we teach the WordPress platform and get people up to speed on it. And so, at the end of the day, the big criteria for us is just those base skills in web development. So this is skills like HTML and CSS and JavaScript, and ideally at least one server-side language. And for us, that's PHP. But again, that's not necessarily a hard requirement, but really just looking for folks, who have built websites in some way, shape, or form.
Okay, that's great. So now you've told us a little bit about what you would look for in terms of talent. So what would the process look like, the interview process for this individual as if they were interested?
Yeah, so we actually keep our interview process relatively simple and sort of streamlined and straightforward. Most of the time, what we'll do is when we're advertising for a position, we'll put a job ad out there. We will, go through all of the candidates and identify, usually 5 or 6 out of the batch to interview, and then we actually do 2 interviews. So the first interview is actually a little bit on the shorter side. It's usually maybe 30 to 45 minutes, maybe an hour in the worst case scenario. And if that first interview is very technically focused. So we're really looking to just gauge the candidate's experience and knowledge and awareness around web development and ideally the WordPress platform, of course. So we ask some questions about WordPress, in that interview. Then after we've done all of the first round of interviews, we actually have a scoring sheet where we actually grade each candidate on a series of different dimensions. And at the end of that, we identify usually 2 or 3 candidates from the list to schedule a second interview with. And so the second interview is a little bit more culture and fit focused, and it tends to run a little bit longer. I like to refer to it as a 2-way interview because not only are we interviewing the candidate and trying to just get a feel for their personality and for sort of the cultural fit and all of that sort of stuff, but it's also a chance for the candidate to interview us. And so we always encourage candidates to ask questions, to us about the company, how we operate, what a typical day looks like, or anything that really kind of crosses their mind. And then after the second interview, we tend to make a decision. We don't. Some organizations, drag out interviews and they have 4 or 5 or even 6, different interviews, and we tend to keep it fairly tight. And then most of the time we make a decision based on that second interview and extend an offer and go from there.
That's great. So you've explained a little bit about the interview process. And perhaps you've touched on this a little bit before, but what do you typically look for in a hire? Other than, of course, that added WordPress experience that you maybe discussed, but how can someone else stand out?
So this one's actually pretty easy as well. So yes, we look for experience. Really, for us, it boils down to we must be able to see some samples of your work, right? So you have to have built a few websites. And we always in our job ads request that people supply us with ideally 3 different websites that they've built. And just to be clear, they don't have to be professional websites built for companies that are live in production. They can just be practice websites. And but ultimately, even if it's like, again, doesn't have to be WordPress, even can just be HTML and CSS and JavaScript just by itself. but we really, really need to see the work. And so, my advice to folks looking to crack into the industry is that, you've got to build a few websites. Build one for your cousin who has a part-time, you know, um, catering business, or your aunt, or or even just one for yourself. A personal portfolio site is a wonderful place to start. Just getting that together, and having something that we can look at to really gauge your skills, because there's lots of these technologies and tools. They're not that hard to pick up, but they're easy to learn, but they're more challenging to master. And we don't expect necessarily mastery at every level of the stack, but we're really looking for, I would just say, like, a general cluefulness in terms of, okay, does this person understand the essentials of building a website? Again, we tend to teach, and we have in-house training that will bring everyone up to a professional standard. But yeah, samples of the work are a must. And so we really need to be able to see, what you've built.
We've heard that's been an ongoing theme from some of our sessions, is just being able to sort of have that portfolio ready of past work, as that would sort of speak for itself. So that's interesting to know that that's still continuing.
Another vote for that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you had talked a little bit about training opportunities in that last question, but how does Elev8 Web Studios approach employee development as well as career growth opportunities?
So, we're a small team, and so we don't have a lot of layers necessarily to sort of move up and into. However, what we do try to do is we try to focus on paying well. And our work has quite a lot of variety to it. We do lots of different things for organizations of all sorts of different sizes. And so, it's anytime you're in a professional services environment, and maybe I'll just quickly kind of do an aside here on, professional services experience, versus going and working for like ABC Manufacturing Inc., as opposed to doing something in professional services. You go and work for a company that has, one website, and you become the web developer for that website. We have over 250 clients, and we've worked on hundreds of different projects. And so the experience you get from professional services is just heads and tails above the type of experience that you're going to get just working for a place that's sort of like standalone. And I spent almost 10 years in professional IT services. So this is not web development. This is things like network infrastructure, servers, and all of that sort of stuff. And the same principle applies. There's organizations in town on the IT side of things that are, I would encourage new folks in the industry to try to get some experience in those. Go and try and work for one of those companies for a while. It's a tough business because there's always lots going on, and there's always lots of activity, but there's really no matching the experience of getting to work with dozens or even hundreds of different, whether it's IT environments or websites. We also have, we do some dedicated professional development time. And so we actually allot, and it's not a huge amount of time. And truth be told, we're when our workload climbs up, sometimes we're not completely consistent with it. But we do try to carve out time on a regular basis, a couple or a few times a month, for ongoing professional development. And so we don't just teach the technical skills here. We teach also the business and soft skills that are important. So things like managing expectations, and how to deal with customers, and how to, all of those sort of soft skills, like, pay huge dividends in terms of your sort of long-term career. And then the other thing that I'll say, just in terms of our philosophy, is that we also recognize that people are going to depart the organization. Some of the folks on our team are early career, some of the folks are late career. But for the early career folks, we live in a world where most of the time you're not going to be with the same employer for 10 or 20 or 30 years, like in my dad's time. And so we really try to focus on equipping people with skills that will help them in the long term. You know, we obviously want to do our best. I want to work with every one of my colleagues for a long time, but at the same time, we also accept the reality that folks are going to move on. And so I really want everyone that departs the organization to have been better, to be better for it, and to leave with better skills than the ones that they arrived with.
I think that's great. So do you have any advice for either students or professionals on what not to do or what to do in the interview process?
Oh, this one's easy too. So the biggest no, and we get this all the time. So for those of you who are looking for work that are on the call today, this is maybe the one thing in this entire thing that you might want to take away, with you, is that when we do our technical interviews, we try to ask questions that to gauge the person's experience, in web development and on WordPress. And this principle applies whether it's us or whether it's an IT company or whether it's another software development shop. And the thing to never do is that when you get asked a technical question and you don't know the answer, don't try to make it up on the spot. I can tell, I know this world, I know the tech, I know and I know when I'm being snowed, or when someone's just sort of making things up in the hopes that they might get the answer right. It is much better to just say, I don't know, than to just try to make it up on the spot. Now, also, what I will say is that if that happens to us, and if that happens to me in a technical interview, and we get an answer where we can tell that the person has just tried to guess, that's an instant no hire. Because if you do it to me, you're going to do it to our customers, and that is not acceptable whatsoever. We teach techniques on how to deal with customer situations where you're being asked something that you don't know the answer to. But this is just a general life principle that like is a takeaway here. It's much better to say, I don't know, but I can find out. And that's one of the techniques we use in-house when we talk to customers. Despite the fact that we are focused completely on the WordPress platform and we have like lots of experience in it, there's still lots of stuff that we haven't really necessarily done before. And we encounter those situations all the time. And it's important, it's really essential to not try to convey that you know something that you don't. So that would be the biggest sort of like never do that, in a job interview. You're better off to say, I don't know. And believe it or not, in our interview process, that's not, I don't know does not necessarily mean it's a no hire. Because really, when we ask the technical questions, we're not expecting everyone to have an answer for every single item. We're trying to gauge the candidate's experience and abilities and be able to understand where they're going to need more help and maybe where they're going to need some training. So that would be the definite like no.
I think that's just good general life advice as well. It speaks to your character when you're able to be honest. And I think that in the interview process as well, being able to speak to that honesty from that candidate, if they were to come forward and admit that they're, not so versed in something, that may and would probably definitely lead to their benefit in the end. So that's great advice.
It's the tech world is enormous. There's nobody that knows it all, and anyone that tries to or thinks that they do or tries to convey that they do, is going to be spotted by someone more experienced. So
yeah. Okay, very good advice. So Jason, what would you say makes your company unique?
I'm going to bring it back to that focus. There's a lot of companies out there that they build websites just like we do, but they also do social media advertising. They also do advertising. They may do marketing. They may do IT support. And the bigger the list of services, the less amazing you're usually going to do, on each individual one. So I don't know if that necessarily makes us unique, but it certainly makes us unusual. Because most, another example would be building websites, right? Some shops will say, well, it doesn't matter what platform, we'll make it happen for you. Shopify, no problem. Drupal, no problem. We'll figure it out. But I think the reality is that in those situations, you're going to end up with mediocre work. And so that focus is really, one of our sort of our big differentiators. It's funny because there's half a dozen of us. When I started out, I actually did this as a freelancer. So I was just sort of working for myself, but there's half a dozen of us now, and we're still pretty small. But even with half a dozen of us full time on the WordPress platform, I still feel like we could be doing a better job of keeping up with all of the new developments in the space. There's always lots going on. There's always lots of new things happening, in the WordPress ecosystem. And so if we feel like if we feel like we could still be improving upon that very narrow expertise that we've aimed to focus on, someone who works with a dozen different platforms or a dozen different services has certainly got no chance of really, staying up to date with all of that stuff.
I would say that's a very fair point. So what perks does your company offer to those who are a part of it?
We actually keep things pretty basic. We try to just pay really well, so our pay tends to be at the top end of the regional range, and we pay really close attention to work-life balance. It's work-life balance is sort of a buzzword in the last like 4 or 5 years, and we take it extremely seriously here, to the point where after-hours work is actually not just discouraged, but is forbidden. So, some companies will say to you, well, we don't expect you to check your email after hours. We take it a step further and we say, we expect you not to be checking your email after hours. And, our goal is to come together 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and execute really, really well as a team. And beyond that, I want people to live their lives and to be able to have that actual work-life balance. And so our rule here, and now having said that, there are occasions where we need people after hours, and we define those circumstances up front. And it's usually some sort of emergency where one of our websites has been like severely impacted, or something that interrupts the flow of money, right? So on an e-commerce website, if sales have stopped for one reason or another, that's the kind of emergency that will result in some after hours involvement. But the rule we have is that if we need you, we will call you. So one of our team members is on call 24/7 for the IT environment, and he gets alerts if something is out of compliance in the technical environment. But it's the same sort of thing. We really just, we focus on the basics: pay really well, treat people really well while they're here, and focus on that work-life balance.
That sounds great. So why do you personally love working at Elev8 Web Studio?
Well, I mean, I'm the owner of the company. And so, for me, starting the company, it was really all about freedom and, being able to sort of control my destiny, to the extent that you can do that in the self-employment world. Of course, there's no one I mean, we're a project-based organization. So, we're constantly looking for a new influx of projects, kind of coming in the door at any given moment. But for me, when I got to a point where it was, I think 2018, where I was getting too busy to do it all myself. And I had to make a decision as to whether or not I maybe raised my prices, or maybe got rid of a few customers that maybe I didn't enjoy working with as much to accommodate, the demand. And ultimately what I decided to do was build a team. And the way that I like to put it is that we try to build we built the company that I wish I could have worked for. And so, every place treats their folks different and has different work environment. But, I tried to take away the good and the bad from each of those experiences that I've had in the past. And we've tried to build something where people enjoy coming into work. and the work is interesting. And again, that work-life balance thing where it's like at 4 o'clock, you should be out of here. And you will get scolded if you are still, if I can tell that you're still doing stuff after hours. And for the most part, most of our team's gotten used to that workflow, and I think they appreciate it quite a lot. So if I could maybe answer on behalf of my colleagues, I think that's what I think a lot of them would say, is that there's a real focus on the work-life balance here.
That's great. And as you had mentioned, it sort of has been one of those trends, but some companies do it better than others. So it's nice to see that you follow through on what you say. I would say WEtech does a great job of doing that as well.
Awesome.
So the last question that we sort of have here before we jump into some audience Q&A is, what advice do you have for someone who is wanting to get into a tech role?
Yeah, so I would have two big pieces of advice. Number one is make stuff. It's never been easier to get into tech. All of the tools that you really need are free. All of the learning resources that you need are out there and free. And to bring it back to what I mentioned earlier, when it comes to when we post a job ad, we tend to get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applicants. Our last development position that we posted, I think we got over 500. And so very quickly, we have to narrow down 500 resumes to 5 or 6. And I can tell you, one of the best ways to stand out is to have samples of work that we can see. And if we don't see those most of the time, it's sorry, but we have to move on. We just don't have the capacity to do deeper dives on hundreds and hundreds of candidates. Most hiring companies are going to want to see stuff that you've done. It's that simple. There's one college out there, private college, I think it's called Juno College. Part of their program is that when every graduate finishes from their program, they have built 3 websites. And it's actually gotten to the point where I can tell the Juno College graduates by looking at the websites that they supply in their thing, in their application. And that's a fantastic approach, because you come out of the program, you have actually built some things. You haven't just learned a bunch of theory and stuff like that. And then the second piece of advice, which I think is a little bit more generalized in nature, which is build and maintain your professional network. And so I've seen lots of situations, and as I mentioned, I've been at this a while, where someone who works somewhere for 10 or 15 years suddenly finds themselves out of work. And that's not the time when you need to go out on LinkedIn and connect with all of the people that you worked with over the years. The time to do that is now, and always. And so, as a matter of fact, that's one of our internal philosophies, is that our team members and my colleagues, they're permitted to be on LinkedIn during the day. And we encourage them to connect with to customers that they're working with, and so on and so forth, and building that network. When you need the network is the wrong time to build it. And so, get out there into Hackforge has events that will get people connected to the other people in the tech community. WEtech puts on events, and the WEtech events will connect you and get you bumping shoulders with other business owners. So I've attended WEtech events, and many of my peers who own companies in the Windsor region have also attend these events, and you're going to meet them there. And I'll tell you, my dad used to say, he always said this when I was growing up, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I would say that of the two, that who you know is actually the stronger of the two things. Of course, you need skills. Of course, you have to be able to do the job. But in terms of finding work and getting connected with those opportunities, you really have to build and maintain that professional network, because it's everything. So yeah, that would be it for me.
That's excellent advice. And that's something that I try to convey in all of the Tech Connect sessions that I do. Is sometimes I'll mention it a little later, but we do have a sort of community group on LinkedIn to connect. And some students who I ask, oh, do you want to join the community hub? They say, oh, sorry, I don't have LinkedIn. I'm not looking for a job right now, so I don't need it. And it's like, well, no, but you're in school. You need to keep these connections while they're fresh, to definitely keep them as you work through your professional career. So thank you very much for that. So next we will start to take some audience questions. So the first one I have here, it actually just went away, sorry. With WordPress holding such a large market share, I'm curious why finding WordPress specific developers is such an issue. What do you attribute the disconnect to?
The answer isn't as profound as maybe we would hope, but from I think the biggest reason is that WordPress tends to be not the sexy new technology that's out there. And so, WordPress has a long heritage. It's been around for over 20 years now. And WordPress didn't always have the greatest reputation. Its security situation was not very good in the first probably 8, 10 years of its existence. The underlying APIs that you're using with WordPress aren't quite as beautiful and elegant as some of the more modern web frameworks that have come out there. And so it tends to be sort of like viewed as the sort of lame technology, that you really don't want to learn that. You want to be doing something more exciting and more modern and what have you. Having said that, despite all of its flaws, it became the #1 platform in the world because it just did a better job than everything else that was out there. And there's certain things like network and ecosystem effects that have helped propel WordPress to the top. But to answer the question more directly, the reason I think we have a hard time finding that talent is just because it tends to be sort of looked down upon by many in the tech community.
Maybe unnecessarily so, but yeah, that's
I think so. I mean, but I'm sort of biased, right? So
and now maybe I am too.
most of the time when we hire, we are so of all the hires that I can think of that in the last few years, we've brought experienced WordPress people on, I would say 20% of the time.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, 80% of the time, and it's just a rough guess, but probably 3/4, 80% of the folks that we've brought onto the team, we've had to teach them the WordPress platform.
Okay, good to know. And then the next question I have here is, it's a bit longer. It says, many small to medium-sized businesses and organizations likely don't have the resources to have a dedicated web developer and don't know what they don't know when it comes to making their website accessible. And trying to figure it all out can be very confusing. What advice would you give to people in those situations? Where should they turn and what should they do first?
Sam, can you read that question off to me again? Because it was
Yes,
longer and I want to make sure I properly grokked it.
absolutely. I can even write it in the chat if you would like. Let me copy it. There, so I'll read it off. So many small to medium-sized businesses and organizations likely don't have the resources to have a dedicated web developer and don't know what they don't know when it comes to making their website accessible. And trying to figure it all out can be confusing. What advice would you give to people in those situations? Where can they turn and what should they do first?
So, thank you very much for that, by the way. Interestingly, that's a very good point. Lots of companies don't have the budget or the capacity to have an in-house web developer, and that's actually where we come in, right? As a professional services company, we can come in and advise you and lead and basically kind of help you get to where you need to go, in terms of your website. And so, for those companies that don't have an in-house web presence but are thinking about accessibility, because we have things like the Access to Ontarians with Disabilities Act, the AODA, which there's actually a fairly important deadline coming up at the end of the year, and many companies must have accessible websites, by that point. And web accessibility is a complex topic. And so, in the past, we've taken a leadership role in telling our customers what they have to do and showing them where they need to go. And then more recently, we've actually started working with an accessibility expert. We've just brought this person into one project so far, but we're gearing up to get them involved in more of them, because believe it or not, even though our whole team go through accessibility training, we have formal policies and processes around accessibility compliance and making sure that those things are part of our practice. Even despite all of that, working with this particular expert who actually uses a screen reading device, we learned a lot that that we were able to do to further improve the accessibility posture, of our customer website. So a very long-winded answer to maybe a long-winded question, but for those companies that don't have in-house expertise, that's really where we come in. And, where necessary, we will connect people directly with the outside experts as well.
That's great to know. So are there any other questions from the audience? If not, I do have a couple other that I have prepared. But we'll maybe give it a minute just in case anybody is typing one of their questions, and then I'll pick the best one from our list here. Okay, maybe I'll choose one from our list. So how can a fresh graduate, and this is perhaps maybe something we've discussed, but how can a fresh graduate stand out in the application process?
Yeah, definitely give us the goods. Give us links to the websites, that you've built. They don't even have to be live production websites. There's a platform called Vercel, Vercel, that you could build websites on it. It's not WordPress, but you can build websites on the platform. It uses a tech called Next.js, where you can host your website for free. There's, the whole stack, from the tools we use to build websites to the infrastructure we need to host and to run them. You can do all of that for nothing. Visual Studio Code is free. Our WordPress plugin, I'll plug the extension right now. We have a VS Code extension called WordPress Snippets, where we bring the whole WordPress API directly into Visual Studio Code. And we have over 400,000 developer users that are using that extension, and it's free too. So, yeah, that would really be the answer is just, you got to do stuff. You got to build stuff. And it's easier than ever. When I first started, the tools cost money, and there was nobody offering free hosting outside of a few, folks like GeoCities and Angel Fire. These were platforms in the late 90s that would host a free website for you. But basically, we've gotten to a point where all the tooling and everything is free. It just takes your time, and that's the currency that you have to sort of use to build that experience out.
That's great. So I believe that's all that we have from our Q&A portion. So thank you to everyone for their great questions. If your question was not answered, I believe we did get to all of them. But if it was not answered, we would encourage you to follow up with our guests on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with Jason. So another big thank you to Jason and Elev8 Web Studio for sharing their insights and advice today. Before we say goodbye, we do have a couple important announcements. So firstly, you should see a poll that is coming up on your screen right now, just sort of asking how likely you are to recommend this event within the future. I see another person said they joined late. Are we going to get a recording, please? Yes, it will be posted on our YouTube. As well, we're going to send out a sort of wrapped email with all of the relevant links that you may find interesting as well. So be sure to fill out the poll that's on your screen now. And then a couple of other announcements. So we will be hosting our next Tech Connect meetup in the new year. So I believe that the link is already in the chat there. So we will be having that upcoming within the new year. So be sure to get your ticket for that. As well, we also have our LinkedIn group called the Tech Connect Community Hub. The link is also in the chat there. It's a great place to post news, updates, as well as job opportunities and connect with the Tech Connect community in an organic way. Also, Emily has just posted our YouTube channel in the chat as well, and that will give you access to both this session, in time once we've had time to upload, as well as past Tech Connect sessions that have been recorded over the past year or so. And you will get a follow-up email from us shortly with a video link and resources from today's session. But other than that, that concludes today's Tech Connect Thursday. So a big thank you to both Jason for your insights, as well as Emily for helping me with our event production today. So until next time, stay plugged into the regional tech scene. Thank you.
Thanks for hosting. Bye-bye.
Take care.